Xavier Restrepo's 40-yard dash at his pro day is a huge red flag. Here's why. Xavier Restrepo ran a very concerningly slow 40 time at his pro day. Ryan, why do we need to be worried about this?
I mean, history is not on his side, Joseph. Like, we're talking about kids that ran over 4.75 in the 40-yard dash since 1999. It is a very small and brief list, and there's just no true producers in the group. We're talking about like maximum of a couple role players. We're not talking about 1,000-yard receivers. If we move the threshold down to 4.7 flat, then you can start finding a couple guys like Keenan Allen, like Jarvis Landry, like some good players there. But 4.76 to 4.83, like somewhere in that ballpark of what Restrepo ran at the Miami Pro Day, that is overly concerning because we are talking now about a historical outlier. It doesn't mean that he can't be successful, but it does mean that the deck is firmly stacked against him being that type of athlete in that small of a frame.
Right. The one thing, and when we talked about Tez Johnson and why his 40 time was concerning, I think one thing that was just generally missed is why we were saying it was an issue. It's not, oh, we have this number now, it doesn't completely correlate with what's on film, we have to completely change our full evaluation on him. That's not what this is. We have an evaluation. We have concerns of him not separating consistently and not having great acceleration, going up against mostly guys that are not going to play in the NFL. So when he's on film, when he had his pro day, runs a 4.8 to give us this indication of he's much slower than the average wide receiver in the league. He may find success, but it's really not a good case for believing that he could find success because there's just no receivers in the league that have been able to produce at this slow. And also at 209 pounds, which is a bit of on the heavier side for a 5'10" guy.
Well, and I would say this, there's going to be two camps for a Xavier Restrepo now. One is going to be the camp of, I had athleticism concerns. I have even more athleticism concerns after the 40-yard dash and just the overall testing at his pro day. It was also a little bit weird that he didn't do any of the explosives either. He didn't vertical, he didn't broad jump.
Right.
Like, it was just very interesting, right? But then the other camp is going to be here, Joe. And I think there's some validity here. Some people are going to say, I love his film. I don't care what he ran. Like, I'm just going to trust the film. And you can be that way on either side, but here's the process, right? The process is the film is most important. But after that, the rest of the draft process matters. Like, if we're just going to throw out these numbers that have historically told us that these numbers, threshold-wise, succeed on the NFL level, I think we're missing the boat there if we don't use every part of the data point and all the information that we are given the opportunity to have. So you could believe Xavier Restrepo is going to be a good football player. I still think that he has a role potentially on the NFL level, but you can't sit there and say this is a clean evaluation. There is some muddiness to this evaluation now, and you have to be able to understand what the positives, what the strengths, and ultimately what the negatives are that you have to consider when evaluating him and projecting him to the next level.
Now, he was super productive at Miami. He had a lot of great production this past year for the Hurricanes. He had Cam Ward throwing him the football, so he had lots of opportunities to make highlights. The way that he's going to succeed in the NFL that plays to his strengths, he needs to stay in the slot. I don't want him running super deep route concepts because he's going to get caught up with by pretty much anybody on the field. But the way that he's able to win is the fact that he's got really quick feet. He's a very shifty route runner. He has the build that is going to help him succeed through contact. That's part of the reason why I'm not overly super duper worried. I didn't have a first round grade on Xavier Restrepo, but I had an early 4th round grade on him. I might end up just keeping him there because an NFL team just drafts him and says, you know what? Just because you're slow doesn't mean you don't end up being a really good slot receiver because you have the requisite tools that tend to lead to success at leads to success as a slot guy.
So Xavier Restrepo was always going to move down the board a little bit. He was going to fall down the board a little bit because of what you said. He is very role specific to an offense. He has to play in the slot. This is not a slot Z. This is not a slot X. Like, he's not going to be able to play on the outside due to his lack of explosiveness and long speed. He's just not going to be able to do it. His home is going to be in the slot, which is fine. We have seen several cases of players just being pure slots and being very, very successful in the next level. I agree with you. He understands how to attack defenders as a route runner. He understands blind spots. He understands how to get in and out of his breaks. He creates pretty easy separation in tight windows. I also, Joe, love one, great hand strength. The kid just doesn't drop much. Like, he just does it. And then his ability to contort his body and make some incredible catches based upon just his body control and finishing through contact. That stuff's pretty special because although Cam Ward was a great player at Miami this past year, there are a couple ball placement issues at times, and Xavier Restrepo was able to bail him out a little bit because of the great just understanding of how to place his body and to contort his body into some very awkward positions and create big plays. So there's a lot of floor to Xavier Restrepo, a lot of things that you like. The question obviously is of the overall impact and the ceiling that he brings to the table.
Going into his background, former 3-star recruit in the 2020 class, pretty lightly recruited. The one thing that's actually kind of funny to look at too, he was 186 pounds when he was coming in as a recruit. So he's packed on a lot of weight that we don't usually find for receivers. In the 247 Sports composite ranking, he was the 623rd rated recruit overall, the 36th ranked athlete in the class, and was the 84th overall recruit in the state of Florida.
Yep, and he, obviously a Florida kid, chose to stay home. Funny enough, when I was looking at the 247 spot, Joe, I like when they do the crystal ball predictions. At one point, he was crystal ball to go to University of Kentucky out instead of Miami, which is very interesting. But lightly recruited kid, like you said, for a lot of the same reasons. I mean, he had some Boston College, Air Force, but like he had some low-end offers like Brown and Cornell, obviously. So this is obviously a very intelligent kid because he had some Ivy League schools coming after him out of the state of Florida. But he ends up staying at home in the state of Florida and developing into one of the very best we have ever seen for the Miami Hurricanes. I mean, he ended his career with 200 receptions and over 2,800 yards, all-time leading receiver at the University of Miami. So he was able to stay home, showcase his talent, and then develop into one of the very best that the Hurricanes have ever had at wide receiver.
Our comp for him is Devon Best, the former Miami Dolphins receiver who came out of the University of Hawaii. On the bigger side, ran in the 4.6s. He was listed at 190 pounds, and he had a couple of 70 reception years, one in particular where he had 79 for 829 yards. So Best, I think, is a pretty steady comparison here when we're trying to find a guy that is so unique, that is a complete, as we've mentioned multiple times, physical outlier.
Yeah, and Devon Best was pretty a stockier build on the slots, but he was really good working as a route runner, creating instant separation. He was kind of a little sneaky after the catch at times, right? Like, he was a little bit of a slippery runner after the catch. I think that kind of really shows what Restrepo is. So it might be a little bit of a weird comp for some, but if you go back and watch Devon Best at Hawaii and then early on in his career with the Miami Dolphins and eventually with the Cleveland Browns, he was very productive for the role that he had. And if Xavier Restrepo ends up being a 70-plus catch a player multiple times in his career, I think we would ultimately call that a pretty successful career, especially for a kid that just ran 4.8 at his pro day.
Folks, comment below. Do you think Xavier Restrepo will still have a successful NFL career? Hit that like button and subscribe. We'll talk to you later.